They don't. They don't care because Bill still signed it. He borrowed the money. He's still on title for half interest. So it's a good technique to use to let an investor go down and borrow the money you need, and then right after they close on a loan, let them deed you part of it. Okay? And we'll talk about using land trusts and doing things that are a little bit more sophisticated than this today. But if you just do that, that's not a bad technique. And that's a way to buy houses sometimes that you can't buy any other way. Their experience. I have had a suggestion that I've made in my other class for years, and that is that you take people to lunch on a regular basis that have more money than you do. I think that's a good technique. And by doing that, first of all, maybe some of that money will rub off on you. You know, maybe they'll loan you some or joint venture something at some place down the line. But number two, most of them have stories. And I've taken two guys to lunch here in the last month, and I let both of them talk, and they were both 2-hour lunches. These guys talk for 2 hours about all the deals, and you know one of the guys just talked for hours and hours about all the deals they made. Well, many times you learn something if you listen. And I take notes during those lunches. I bring a yellow pad. I write stuff down during those lunches because they're little seminars. And you take them someplace nice like Wendy's. And don't go cheap. Get them that big Frosty to last a long time. And you can go for a long time. But people will talk to you. And we're going to talk in a second about finding investors, but you should start thinking about who in your town has that money. And it's probably somebody you don't see on a very regular basis because they're at home a lot. Leads on property. If you have people you're investing money with, tell them what you're buying. Have them call you when they find a good deal or something that looks like a good deal. Other investors. I've got a good buddy who invests in big properties here in town and all over the state. And he says that he typically will start off, he generally raises a minimum of $1 million to buy a property as a down payment. And he'll make a list of 10 people he thinks he can call and gets this $1 million, And he says he normally never has to call more than 2 out of his 10. Because the interesting thing is, those 2 people get excited and they call their friends. I never thought about that. And I typically put deals together just one-on-one, but if you wanted to raise a lot of money and you called the right 2 people to start with, they'd be selling all their buddies. Who's your best salesman if somebody just wrote you a check for $100,000? They are, because they believe in this deal, don't they? They wouldn't written you a check for that $100,000, and they will go out and sell your friends. So I hadn't had that thought, but I can see how that would work. And they have other entities sometimes. If you're in business and you have a corporation and you have a partnership and you have a pension plan, you have to be careful self-dealing with things that you already control. I mean, you can create tax problems for yourself. There's actually prohibitions against self-dealing with your pension plan or your retirement plans. But other people have those same things, don't they? Okay? If you have a pension plan or you have a retirement plan or you have a corporation, there's a benefit to me from dealing with you because we can structure deals with your pension plan and your corporation, and I can't structure with my pension plan and my corporation. So look for people that have these entities because just those entities they control can be very valuable to you. And the last line here I say, you want a passive investor, not a partner. Not a partner. Keep your roles clear from the first contact. You want somebody who's going to allow you to do the work, make the deal, make the decisions, the buy, sell decisions, the management decisions. You don't want to have a lot of committee meetings and discuss what you're going to do on a daily basis. And you don't want people calling you every day to see how you're doing. Okay? And then that would be a mistake. 10 things an investor will do that a banker won't do on page 6. One says, loan you the money with no payments due until you sell. Is there a banker in town that will do that? No way. No way. But if I put together a deal with somebody in this room, and you put up $25,000, and our deal is that $25,000 stays in the deal until we sell it, I've borrowed that $25,000 from you at no payments until we sold the deal, haven't I? Okay? So I can do that with an individual. I can't do that with a banker. Loan you money on a house that needs lots of work. Bankers get pretty nervous when houses need lots of work. And if you have a house, and we bought houses that need lots of work. We bought houses where the ceilings have been falling in and cabinets falling off the walls. Will bankers loan money against those houses? No, they're scared of those properties. So sometimes you find a property that's in such bad shape the bankers won't touch it. Investors will give you the money. Make a deal without an appraisal. Does that save you a little money? Saves you time too, doesn't it? See, the problem with the banking system, it slows you down. They want appraisals, they want title insurance, they want all these things, and all of them take time. Surveys, they all slow you down. You don't need that if you're dealing with private individuals who primarily trust you. I mean, they like the real estate, they like the fact that they're going to have security to real estate, but the main reason they're making this deal is what? They trust you. They believe that you're going to do a good job. It's a good deal. You're the primary thing. And that's the way it used to be in the banking business years ago. Anybody remember when you actually knew who your banker was? Okay, and it wasn't just a number at the bank or something. Now, you have an account numbers. Now the bankers have account numbers. You call up and you ask for 4007. You don't know who that is, but that's your banker today. In the old days, you actually knew who that banker was, and you could get them on the phone, and they would know you, and they'd loan you money because of your personality and your character, and you were trustworthy. They didn't care about the real estate deal, and that's those people are long gone. But the people who have the money in the bank are still here, and that's who you need to deal with. And the same thing with a credit report. Make a deal regardless of your cash flow. Well, this is real important to you. If you don't have much cash flow, if you're just getting started and you're tapped out and you find a good deal, will a banker loan you money? Go to the bank and say, I'm broke, but I've got a good deal. I'm losing money, but I have a good deal. And the same thing here about credit being bad. If you haven't filed your tax returns, see, all these things are red flags to the banker, right? All these things will keep you out of the banking business, but they won't affect you if you're dealing specifically with investors. And make a deal if you don't have a job. I've never had a job. My mom keeps asking me, when are you going to get a job like everybody else, And someday, I guess. 9, make a deal with the amount that you will pay to the investor to be determined at the end of the deal. Again, see, bankers don't like it. They can't think that way. Most bankers can't think that way. They want a percentage. They want 9% or 8% or whatever the interest rate is. They're not going to make you a deal based on how much money you're going to make. Too risky a deal. And number 10 here, make a deal over the phone. After the first deal, make a deal over the phone. And I've called one of my investors from Vegas and had him put money in. That takes some faith now, right? When you're calling from Vegas and ask him to put $250,000 in the account, and we'll sign the papers when we get home. But I've had people do that. I had another guy here in town I had lunch with this week. He said his first really big deal was $1 million cash. And he called the guy up and said, we need to wire transfer the $1 million into this lawyer's trust account. And the guy said, I'm not going to wire $1 million to any lawyer, but I'll wire it to you. And he wired it into his personal account, $1 million with no paperwork. Well, that's remarkable, isn't it? But that's a real deal. That's a real deal. And why did he do that? He trusted this guy. This guy wasn't leaving town with his $1 million. He trusted this guy. So I want you to tell you that story so you think about it. That's the critical ingredient in this. You have to be trustworthy. You have to put together real deals. If you do that, there's no shortage of money. There's a ton of money out there, but all that's got to fit together. What investors are looking for. And jump in here and add to this if you have some things I've missed. I know I'm not the only source of wisdom here, so if you're an investor and you're looking for something that's not on this list, tell me about it. But I think number one thing probably an investor is looking for is safety. They're looking not to lose their capital, especially if somebody's giving you $25,000 or $50,000 or $100,000. Now, it probably has something to do with the percentage of this person's money you're taking. If somebody's a real big eater and they've got $10 million in the bank and they give you $10,000, they probably don't care. But and that's something you should think about when you go to ask somebody for money. If somebody has $100,000 in the bank, how much should you ask them for your first deal? Maybe 10. Not the whole 100 though, right? Because that's going to make them really nervous. They're going to lose sleep if they give you all that money. You can take part of that money, and you should try to get to that point where they're not losing sleep. And if they can afford to lose 10 or 20 or 30,000, that would be an acceptable amount. But don't take every dime they have on that first deal, because then they'll be nervous about it. And you don't want nervous partners. They call you too much. Timely reports and information. If you're going to manage somebody else's money, you need to give them some feedback on a regular basis. And it doesn't have to be monthly. It doesn't even have to be every 6 months. It can be once a year. But come up with a schedule and talk to people about it going in. And there's a checklist here we'll touch on later. But if it's once a year, which is probably enough for most people, give them a report, a detailed report once a year. An investment they understand and can explain to their spouse. One reason the houses make great investments is they're simple to explain. Somebody's putting money up, they're going to get their money back and split the profits. That's easy to explain to somebody. A lot less complicated than some limited partnership deal. Anybody ever seen one of those limited partnerships? How thick are they? They can be like a phone book, and that's single space. If they double space, it may be like 2 phone books. And if they charge by the page, they will. Let's see. An investment that'll make them a profit. That's pretty important, isn't it? So you need to buy something that you're excited about. That's another thing I heard when I talked to these people who are raising money on a regular basis. If you're not excited, if you don't know this is a good deal, you're going to have a hard time selling it to somebody else. If it's just an okay deal, they're going to hear that in your voice. If you're saying, I'm not sure we should buy this one or not, Are you going to be able to raise the money? I don't think so. You've got to be able to say, honestly, this is a really good deal. We're stealing this house. It's way below the market. Then you'll be able to raise money. But it's got to be that kind of deal. And let them define what they expect as for profit. It's good to talk to people and ask them questions like that and then listen and see what their expectations are. If they're looking for 8% return or 10% return, what are you better off doing? No. If you're the investor and you're looking for an 8% return on your money, I'm going to borrow your money. I'll be happy to pay you 8%, see, because I know I can make more than 8%, especially if I'm using a lot of leverage. If somebody, on the other hand, says, I want to double my money every year, if they want a 100% a year return, now who are you talking with? Some lottery player, right? Somebody with unreal expectations. So you might as well find this out up front. If somebody wants you to double their money every year, you don't need them, right? They need to go out and find their own investor because they're speculators. And you don't want to be dealing with speculators. You want to be dealing with people who have realistic expectations. And some people are going to be looking for more income today, and others will be looking for more income later. If we're looking to structure a deal and give people more income today, what's the best way to do that? If you come to me with $100,000 cash and you want 8% income off of that $100,000 cash, can I put together a deal that will give you 8% income? What kind of deal is it going to be? If there's a piece of real estate, what kind of real estate is it going to look like if I'm going to produce 8% income on $100,000 cash? Can I buy one house and do that? If I bought a $125,000 house for $100,000 cash, could I start paying you 8% on a monthly basis? And could I make money on that deal? If that's all I paid you, 8%? What is 8% of $100,000? How much is that a month? How much? Who's got a calculator? Do that real quick. What's 8% of $100,000 on a monthly basis? $666. What was 8%? Is that right? Double check me now. We don't want to be wrong here on tape. People will be listening to this. $666. Okay. Can I afford to pay somebody $666 a month? If you're the investor and you'll put up $100,000 cash to buy this house, and I can buy a $125,000 house for $100 cash, just an example now. Can I afford to pay you $666 a month and make money on this house? Sure. And I could just borrow that money from you, couldn't I? And pay you 8%. That'd be the best way to structure it. Now, if somebody wants capital gains instead, this is ordinary income, isn't it? Everybody understand when I say that? That's ordinary income, which means it's taxed at the highest rate there is. Okay, so if somebody's in a 40% tax bracket, how much of that are they keeping? A lot less. 60% of that, 60% of 8% would be like 4.5%, 5%. They're getting a lot less return. So probably whoever's giving me money at 8% is in what kind of tax bracket? A low tax bracket. This is probably somebody that doesn't have that much money and they're trying to increase their income. If they have that money in the bank, what's the bank paying them on that money right now? Maybe 4 at the high side, right? So you're doubling their income. Is that a good deal for them? If they go from $333 a month to $666 a month, that's significant to them, isn't it? So it can be a good deal for somebody who has $100,000 in the bank and is in a low tax bracket. But let's say somebody's in a high tax bracket. If they're going to give us that same $100,000, we're going to try to give it to them as capital gains, long-term capital gains. How can we do that? Let's say we take the same house and we let them buy it for that $100,000, so now they own that $100,000 house free and clear. And we rent it back from them for a lot smaller amount. They own the house, okay? So Lynn buys his house, he gives me $100,000, he owns his house free and clear. Let's say I agree to rent it to him for 4%. Now what are my payments going to be? This won't be hard. $333, right. If I start paying Lynn $333 a month on his house, will he pay any taxes on that money? It'd be pretty low tax, won't it? Because after taxes, insurance, and depreciation, is he going to have a taxable profit or a taxable loss? Got a taxable loss, right? So why would Lynn do that? Well, Lynn would do that maybe because I agree then to come over here and take an option to buy this house from him at a price that starts at maybe $110,000 next year, $120,000 the following year, $130,000 the following year, $140,000 the following year, But what kind of return is he getting on this side? He's getting 10% over there, isn't he? And how is that 10% taxed? Long-term capital gain. Because I have an option to buy it. I have an option to buy it. So we can structure a deal, and I've exaggerated this deal a little bit just to keep it really simple, but I can structure a deal to give the investor less ordinary income and more capital gains, and by doing that, the investor will net more money. So think about who you're dealing with and know enough about their tax situation. Sure. Well, just look at those numbers, because
how you're structuring it. So
let's say it's your $100,000. This makes it more real.
who's owning the house?
You would own the house, because if whoever owns the house gets the depreciation, don't they? So you would own 100% of this house. The house is your house, and I agree to rent it from you for $333 a month, so you never have to see a tenant. Because you're some big eater. You're working for a living already. You're already working 80 hours a week. You don't want to see this house. You don't want to see the tenant. You want a passive investment that's going to give you a 14% return, most of it in capital gains.
A lease option is what you're doing.
That's exactly right. What I'm doing is I'm leasing that house from you. And the question is, lease option is how we're structuring this. I'm going to protect my interest by leasing this house from you for $333 a month. Now, can I make a profit on that? I'm going to make good money. And here's a good question. How am I making most of my money on this deal? Cash flow. Okay. So if I'm in a high tax bracket, this is not a good deal for me. But if I'm in a low tax bracket and you're in a high tax bracket, what we're doing is we're structuring this deal so it's a good deal for me. I'm making most of my money on a monthly basis. I'm not going to make as much over here. Now, hopefully we'll make something over here, but I'm not going to make as much on this side. You're going to make most of yours on this side. You're going to make most of yours on the long-term capital gain side, not on the income side. So my point is you think about who you're dealing with here and what do they need? What kind of income do they need? And if you can structure a deal to give them the right kind of income, you can borrow the money cheaper. Is this a good, cheap way to borrow money? How much am I paying on an annual basis? 4%. If I never buy this house, has it been a good deal for me? Ask that question. If I never buy that house, if this house is worth more than $100,000, right? Let's say it rents for $1,200 a month, and my expenses out of that 12 or 3, so I have $900 a month in net income, and I'm paying you $333 a month. How much am I making a month? Just under $600 a month, right? $567 a month. How much is that a year? Over $6,000, almost $7,000 a year. Over 5 years, how much is that? $35,000. How many people would do this deal if you never got to buy it? A lot of people would. A lot of people do that deal just to make $400 or $500 a month. So that's a good way to structure something if somebody else is in a high bracket and you're in a low bracket. Okay? So you work this from both sides. As long as you can. As long as you can. If you keep raising this price 10% a year, you just never know if that price if your option price is going to get higher than the retail price at some point. You just don't know. Sometimes prices double in a hurry. Sometimes they go real flat. So you can build in that 10% of your appreciation. If you bought that house far enough below the market, you'll probably stay ahead of them for a very long time, because eventually the market will take off. I mean, we may have 4 or 5 years where it doesn't do much. Then they'll have 2 or 3 years where it goes up pretty fast. So if you catch that 2 or 3 years where it goes up in a hurry, you'll generally get way ahead again.
Could you structure it as a percentage of the market price so that you retain your say?
You can, but if you'll study the example we just put up there, where you've given the investor that 10% a year appreciation, that simple interest to start with, if you're giving him, when your house is going up, if you have a $150,000 house and it goes up 10% this year, how much did it go up? $15,000. If it goes up 10% the next year, how much did it go up? Not 15. Not 15, because now it's going from 165,000. Now it's going up 16.5 the next year, didn't it? So see, there's an advantage to you, because you own an asset that's going up at compound rates, and if you agreed to buy it on this schedule, it's simple interest rates. So you can, I've given away 16% on deals like that and still made a lot of money. So, well, I'll get both questions. Yes, sir. Well, 20 years is what I consider fairly long term. 10 years is not very long term in the overall scope of things. Most of us are going to live much longer than 10 years. Again? I'll repeat the question. The question is, what was a long-term deal? And he has 17 years, but between 10 and 20 years is long enough for you to catch. The question is, how long is it going to take for this next cycle to take off? You want to catch at least one up cycle in the real estate market. People write books about 7-year cycles and all this. I don't think they're that consistent. I think it comes and goes. because during the 80s we had longer than 7 years and nothing happened. So sometimes it takes longer than 7 years. And in some towns, it takes a long time for something to happen. There are some towns that are smaller now since the Big War. And if you're from the South, you remember when the Big War was. It was in 1860, okay? And there are towns that are still waiting for the big comeback. Well, if you're in one of those towns, the cycle is like 150 years.
I mean, is it totally your option?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And you want to structure things so it is your option. The question is, how's the investor protected? And let's just go back to numbers. If we have a house that's worth $150,000 that we buy for $100,000, okay, and my option price looks like this: 110 the first year, 120 the second year, 130 the third year. How is the investor protected if I never buy that house? What does he get if I don't buy it? He gets a $150,000 house for a $100,000 investment. Now that may not turn out to be exactly as he hoped, but it's still probably not a bad deal, is it? Because as soon as I walk away from this deal, he's going to get two things. He's going to get a jump in his income because the rent's going to go up, right? I'm only paying him $333 a month. His income will go up to maybe $1,000 a month. So that's going to be very good. And the other thing, he's going to get his house for free. So if it's structured where the investor is pretty safe, even if, you know, what the investor is going to hope that you don't buy the house. He'll make more money if you don't buy the house, typically. Now, if this house goes down in value, it's a really weird deal and it goes down in value, then you probably wouldn't buy the house. But I'll tell you something. As you deal with investors, what are you going to try to do in every case? You're going to try to take care of them, aren't you? You're going to try to make it a good deal for them, because if you make a good deal for them, what happens next? You get to do another good deal with them, right? The first time you do a bad deal with somebody, it's probably the last deal you're going to do with them. So it's important that you do good business. And as I've talked to folks around the country who've been dealing with investors, they say they almost always protect their investors. Very few cases does somebody have to walk away from a deal. And because of that, it's almost always safer from you to borrow the money, because you know you're going to pay it back anyway. Yes, ma'am.
And if you were to have a deal structured like that, how would you handle things like a new roof for the investment community?
You would split it. If you're going on a 50-50 deal, and we'll talk about this as we get into some details, but if you and I own a house 50-50, then we split any expense or any income 50-50. And hopefully there'll be enough income to cover most of the expenses. If you are leasing a house from somebody, the question is now, is it a net lease where you're responsible for all the maintenance, or they're responsible for some of it? And that's something you need to talk about and deal with. Typically, I structure it where it's a net lease, and I'll be responsible for the maintenance, but then I'll say to them, if we have something we have to do, it's better for you to pay the bill, and I'll pay you more rent that month. Because it's going to look more normal if you pay a bill for $2,000 or $3,000, and then I increase the rent by $2,000, and it will be if I pay all the expenses. It just look better on our tax returns. So we can adjust it. But if I say to somebody, you're going to make 4% on your money, we're going to have them make 4% on their money at the end of that year. And we may have to make some adjustments during that year to make that 4% work out, but we'll make them 4%. Okay. On the next page, we talk about tax-free investment income. And I'm going to show you how to structure several things as we go through here with entities that are tax-free. What kind of entities don't pay taxes? No, corporations do pay taxes. Nonprofits don't pay taxes. That's an interesting thought. Roth IRAs, retirement plans, most of the time don't pay taxes on income earned today. They're deferring that income. And then low-income taxpayers sometimes don't pay taxes. Your kids may pay less taxes than you do. So if you have kids that need to be that like to be investors, sometimes you structure a deal to give the younger generation, who's in a lower tax bracket, some of the income. So if you think about some of the deals we've talked about already today, we're already starting to structure deals where somebody in a high-income tax bracket takes a different part of the deal. Well, that may be you. You may be in a high-income tax bracket. You may want the part of the deal that's a capital gain, and your kids may want the part of the deal that produces more income. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. Then the last reason people, or the last thing investors are looking for here on page 8, and it's not in your book, you have to add G here, kind of add it in the new book, and that is they're looking for no work and no hassles. Most people I invest with like to talk about it maybe for an hour a year, but they actually don't want to come out and see the property and meet the tenants. They're not looking for another job. They are happy for me to do all the work. I taught a seminar in this town years ago, and it was a very short seminar, and it was to the local dental society. Some of you in the room were there, I think. And at the end of that seminar, several people came up and said, "That's way too much work for me, but if you ever come up with a deal and you need the money, call me." Well, that worked out okay. That wasn't my intent teaching that seminar, but that worked out just fine. There's a lot of people that are working pretty hard already. They're already working 60 or 80 hours a week. They don't want any more work, but they have money sitting in the bank at 3%, or they have money sitting in their pension plan, and they're nervous about it being in the stock market or someplace else not earning much, and they would like to see that money work harder for them. But they understand somebody has to work to make this deal happen, and if you're willing to do that work, then you're entitled to the profits. Page 9. Identifying investors. Tips for finding investors. First tip I have for you is start close to home. And the whole time I've been doing this, and I've been working with investors pretty much my entire 30-year career, and I told you earlier I bought about half my houses with investors. I've only had 6 investors altogether, and several of those people were just for one deal. They turned out to be one deal investors, and but 3 of my investors have been with me almost a full 30 years, and I've done the same deals over and over and over again with these people. And the message here is, number one, you don't need a whole bunch of folks. You don't need a list of 20 or 30 people. In fact, your life is going to be so much simpler if you just have 2 or 3 people you're doing repeat business with over and over again. If you're going to do a lot of business with somebody, what's one thing they need to have? More money. More money. You know, if a person only has $25,000, and that's what happened with my one-time deals, and somebody would come up with $25,000 for one deal, but that's all they had. So that's the only deal I could do with them. It would take them another 10 years to save up another $25,000. So yeah, if you use a little common sense going in, and if I could do it all over again, there's several people who I invested in with just one deal that I would just wouldn't have made that deal with them. I'd rather stick with 2 or 3 people. And then you can start making combination deals, which we'll talk about in the class, where you can get them to loan you money for one deal and then let them participate in another deal. And when you do that, sometimes the loans are really good interest rates. I mean, I can borrow money from people at 6%, 5%, even 4%. I've got somebody trying to loan me money right now at 4% interest. Is that a good rate? Yeah? You didn't catch his name? But here's the deal. He will give me 4% interest if I'll invest more money for him. He wants to give me an equal amount. He said, I'll give you as much as you want, and I'll loan it to you, but I want you to take an equal amount and make me good deals with it. So there's an added cost, isn't there? I have to give away half my profit, and I have an example of that in the book here that we'll cover here later today. Look for somebody who likes and understands real estate. Don't try to convert a stock market investor. Too much work. Hard to train those people. They think they're going to get rich tomorrow, and they all have the same mindset, and most of them are just eternal optimists. They think tomorrow's going to be the big hit, you know, and they also think they're going to do it overnight. They don't think it's going to take 10 years. They're going to do it in 6 months or a year, because they read all these newsletters that say, you buy at this point, you sell at this point, you make 600% on your money. That's the deal they're looking for, and that's hard to do in real estate. Hard to make 600% in 1 year. And if you do, you want to keep it all yourself. You don't want to give that one away, right? So don't convert folks. Look for people who already invest in real estate. Where could you find some of those people? What's one place you could find people who invest in real estate and like it? In one of these seminars, maybe. Yeah, imagine that. People that go to seminars to learn more about real estate. So use your time wisely when you go to a class. Pass out business cards. Get to know somebody. Now, of all the folks in this room, you're probably not going to hit it off with everybody. But if you can just make one friend out of this class, that'd probably be smart. And if it's somebody who has, compatible needs to yours, that either has money or wants to do the work, you could probably match something up, and that makes sense. Where else could you find somebody that's already interested in real estate other than a seminar situation? Local investment club, thank you. Somebody that belongs to a local investment club. And there's all sorts of folks there, and I'm not trying to match you up, but think about that. And if you don't have it at a club and you don't go to a seminar, where else might you find somebody? What's another source of people that already own real estate and like it?
Maybe
tax rolls? Yeah, you can go down it. I mean, it's just as simple as everybody that owns a piece of real estate is listed where? Down at the tax assessor's office, right? And it tells you something about them, doesn't it? It tells you if they live in that house or not. So if you wanted to, you could generate a list of everybody who owns property that's investment property, and you could write them all letters. I don't think that's a very effective way to do things, but you could. Where else do people advertise that they own real estate every day? The newspapers. What kind of ads would they be running? Houses for sale, houses for rent, right? Most of those people are investors, the ones that are for rent now. The one houses for sale, most of them maybe aren't investors, but there's probably some. And probably one question you should ask people, if you're talking to somebody on the phone that you call on an ad, is, are you an investor? And if they are, maybe you want to get to know these people better. Look for someone with the same values, and by that I mean somebody in the same basic culture that you're in. Somebody who values money the same way you do. Somebody has the same long-term outlook. And you need to figure out what your values are, I guess, to start with. But if you mix things up, it's hard to establish long-term relationships with people. On the same track, Investment club, that's probably a good sign. But somebody that thinks, if you want to hold something for 30 years, make sure you invest with somebody else who wants to hold something for 30 years. If you want the income and they want the capital gain, that's okay. Match them up. Somebody that has money, more money than you need, and we've already talked about this a little bit, and in Steve's comment that you should have 10 times as much money is probably not out of line. If I needed $100,000 from somebody, I may not look for somebody that has $1 million cash in the bank, but I certainly look for somebody that has at least $1 million net worth. So that $100,000 wouldn't be that big a risk to them. Someone who is likely to make a long-term investor, somebody who has ties to the community, somebody who has a stable business or employment, somebody who has similar valuables, and relatives or close friends. Are those good people to invest with? I say easy but dangerous money. Easy but dangerous money. A lot of times you can talk those people out of their money, okay? But what's the dangerous side? If you don't pay it back, what happens? It really messes the deal up, doesn't it? Messes your family up, messes your friendship up. So be very, very careful about borrowing from people who are related to you or people who are your best friends. Now, I have made deals, and I own several properties with my dad, but I bought those properties with him at a point in his life where he needed me. I didn't need him. We got in a situation where he needed more income, where he needed some capital gains growth, and he came to me to invest that money, and it was the right thing to do, and it made a lot of sense. Okay? I've also invested with friends who needed me. So you have to be careful. If you need them, you want to make darn sure whatever you're getting into is a good deal for both of you, because otherwise you ruin a friendship or you ruin a relationship. Bad business. Now down here at the bottom, I say, let's draw a profile of your potential investor. I was hoping, I had a friend I was hoping was going to show up today because he makes a good profile. I'll draw his picture for you so you can recognize him here. First of all, if you're going to draw a profile of this guy, what color hair will your potential investor have? Gray. I like that. And what's the option to that? None. Now, why is that? Why do you want to invest in somebody with gray hair or no hair at all? What's the answer? They're more likely to have some money in the bank, aren't they? They're more likely to have some money saved up. That's one thing. What else? Should have some knowledge and experience, hopefully a little bit of wisdom. And one other thing. And maybe connection, but one other thing. What's true about somebody who's in their 60s or 70s or 80s that's not true about somebody in their 20s or 30s or 40s? Tell me about how their activity level. Yeah, I mean, are they likely to get in trouble? Who's more likely to get in trouble? Somebody 70 years old or somebody 30 years old? Probably somebody 20 or 30 or 40, right? Because it's a different time of life. And I've learned this through life, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Some people, and it's an interesting thought, some people bring their kids into business with them and let their kids start doing things. Well, if you turn your business over to your 25-year-old kid, what could go wrong? Everything. Because at 25, you're fearless. You're absolutely fearless. See, at 70, you're not fearless anymore, right? At 70, you're probably a lot more stable. Maybe you're a little slower in making decisions, but you're going to make better decisions typically, and your personality isn't like this. You calm down a little bit. So a lot of advantages to people who have calmed down a little bit. A couple other questions here. What kind of jewelry does this guy have on? Got a fancy Rolex watch and 2 or 3 gold bracelets and a great big diamond ring on his hand? Who are those folks? People trying to sell you something. Generally somebody trying to sell you something. I was in a meeting the other day and this guy had a beautiful suit on. And I'm not impressed with suits, but this guy had a good looking suit on. And I didn't ask him what that suit cost, but I knew that suit. And what kind of suit does this guy have on, by the way? None, right. No suit, right? This guy had a beautiful suit, probably a $1,000 suit, probably a $100 tie, $600 shoes, and beautiful watch. Who's this guy? What does he do for a living? He's an investment manager. An investment manager, right? He's going to give you advice and charge you a lot of money for it. But he's not investing his money. He doesn't have any. He's wearing his money. Okay? And I could go on. How many people read the book, The Millionaire Next Door? Read that book. If you haven't read it, write that down and read that book. The Millionaire Next Door. It's probably in the libraries now. It was a bestseller a couple of years back. But it was written by a couple guys who were going to study millionaires and how they made their money. And they found something pretty interesting. They found it, and they had these parties for them. They bring in caviar and they bring in champagne, because they figure that's what millionaires ate, And they'd have people come in and they wouldn't touch that stuff. They said, how about some saltines and a Diet Coke, because first of all, they didn't want to get swacked with these guys in the room. They figured they'd try to sell them something, And second of all, most millionaires are not drinking champagne and eating caviar on a regular basis. They take their money and they buy something with it. They don't just waste it. So it's an interesting book because you find out that the people that have a lot of money typically are not the flashy dressers. They don't drive fancy cars. What kind of cars does this guy drive? Yeah, maybe a 10-year-old Ford or something. He's not driving a new Jaguar, a new Mercedes-Benz. And some folks that have a lot of money do drive fancy cars and live in nice houses, but most of them are fairly conservative even when it comes to that. Anybody know who Warren Buffett is? You all do, right? Anybody know what kind of house Warren Buffett lives in? Same house he's lived in for the last 40 years. Has his income gone up? Yeah, but he hadn't moved. He likes that house. And I read his book. Now, he may have moved since he wrote that book, but, he doesn't spend a whole bunch more money just because he has billions of dollars a day. He lives the same typical lifestyle. So it's an interesting study, I think. And if you're looking for people, some folks have misconceptions about what somebody looks like who has $10 million. And they probably look just like the people in this room. They probably wear khaki pants and kind of old shoes and drive old cars because they know where the money works best for them. It's none of that stuff. Some questions to ask, and so I give you under this profile. Just write something down under this profile. See if you can write something down as for age range, number of years investing in real estate. How long you want somebody to have invested before you meet them? A year or two? 10 years. And if somebody's in their 50s or 60s, it might be 30 or 40 years. It might be somebody who's been doing this for an awful long time. What kind of net worth do you want from your investor? And write down a minimum number. What kind of minimum net worth do you want from somebody who you want to invest with? And this might differ for different people in here because some of you may be looking for somebody who just has $5,000 or $10,000, and some of you may be looking for somebody who has $100,000 or $200,000. Do they own property now? Answer to that's got to be yes. You don't want to deal with somebody who doesn't own any real estate. That would be foolish. And you should be able to write down a reason that they would want to invest with you. Okay? What do you have to offer these folks? And we've covered some of that, but you should be able to answer that. Some questions you might want to ask them. This is not in your book. I just wrote this down in my book. But I would ask them if they've invested with other people before. Ask them if they've invested with other people before. And then after they've responded, if they say yes, ask them how it turned out. And let them talk. See what they tell you. If they've had some bad experiences with other people, sometimes they may be the cause of those bad experiences. So you want to hear as much of that story as you can. If they've had to fire somebody else, you want to find out how picky these people are to work with and how much advice they're going to give you. Ask them if they've, you ask a question sort of like this, can you tell me about any lawsuits you're currently in or have been involved in the past? Why do you want to ask that question? You want to find out if they've sued a whole bunch of folks, or if they're suing people now, or somebody's suing them now. And it's funny, people will tell you things they shouldn't tell you sometimes. Sometimes they'll go on and tell you about deals they've been involved in. And what you're trying to do is just like when you're screening for tenants, you're trying to screen these people a little bit. And it's not exactly like you're dealing with tenants because these people don't want what you have as much as you want what they have maybe. But you need to ask questions to make sure you're not getting involved with the wrong folks. Attracting investors on the next page. If you're a broker, you need to start thinking like an owner. How many people are real estate brokers in this room have a license? That's quite a few folks in the room. You need to, if you're going to invest with other folks, you don't want to think as a broker where you're trying to collect a commission out of this deal. You have to think as an owner, and what does an owner look for when they buy real estate? Profit. They don't look for a commission, they look for profit. So if you're a broker and you're used to getting paid a commission when you sell somebody something, you need to switch gears and not think like the seller and not think like the broker, but think like an owner, think like a buyer, and always be on the buyer side. Always be making the best deal you can for the buyer. I've watched a couple of people in this town who dealt with investors get in a lot of trouble because their primary motivation in putting these investor deals together was the commission they collected when they put them together. Okay? And then after they collected that commission, they kind of forgot about them. They will still own part interest in here, but it wouldn't be a priority. Their next motivation was to put another deal together so they could collect another commission. Well, you have to be careful about that strategy because what happens is you run through a lot of folks like that and you're not around for the long-term profit. This business pays very well if you stay in it for a while. The people that are in it for very short periods of time sometimes don't make any money at all. And this guy ended up going broke, and a lot of his investors lost money because he didn't do a good job after he put them into the deal. He was just collecting commissions going in up front. So think like a buyer, not a broker. The first step in investing successfully is investing successfully yourself. The first step in attracting investors is investing successfully yourself. So if you haven't bought something yourself, your timing is not good. Don't go out and try to recruit investor money until you've at least bought one deal, and hopefully more than one deal yourself, so you know how it works. So you have some credibility, so you can put a deal together and make sense. The second step is contracting for a good deal, and then going out and raising the money. And I believe that this is the only way to raise money. Have the deal first. Have the deal under contract first, not just a house you drove by that looks like a good deal, but a house where you sat down and negotiated the contract. You know you can buy it at a certain price and on certain terms, and you may have an investor in mind when you're doing this. You may have somebody in mind that you've already talked to about would they put up $25,000 or $50,000. You might have already asked somebody the question, how much of a down payment would be comfortable for you, and see what they said, and see if they said $25,000 or $50,000, so you know how much money you have to deal with, and then you go out and put that deal together, and then make the contract and have a hard contract, and then I've got a list of folks here you might want to go see. After you have this contract in your hand, you probably want to go out and see people that you already know, and if you don't know many people, and you don't have contacts in town, you need to start making contacts in town. You need to start taking people to lunch on a regular basis, so at the end of a year, you at least know 50 people pretty well because you bought them lunch. And 50 times 4 is how much? $200. That's how much you spend if you go to Wendy's, okay? And they do the Whopper burgers for 99 cents. You can even cost less than that. But so other source of references here. CPA, your attorney, your banker, insurance agent, and these should be people that work for you already, so you have some kind of relationship with them. And then business contacts, people you buy things from or people you hire to do work for you. Do plumbers make good money in this town? Yeah. Do anybody else in the trades make good money in this town? Some of them do. You may be doing business with some folks that have more money than you do. And they may not look like they have more money than you do because when you see them, they're all greasy or something. But they may be making a lot of money. So you should know, identify those folks and talk to them about what you do. Pension fund advisors. Now, I like to deal with people that manage their own pension plan, self-directed plans, but there are people in this town and every town who make their living by managing other people's pension plans. Okay, so those are folks you need to get to know because they have access to just a lot of money. And I write down physicians, and you write down dentists and airline pilots. The problem with these folks is they get hit on a lot. Everybody knows they're supposed to have money, so you're not going to be the first one to get there. But if you have a personal relationship with them, or you have something that nobody else has offered them, and maybe a bit different type of deal or a better structured deal, then there's no reason, if you know these people, not to talk to them. They need help too. And a lot of them pay a lot of taxes, and a lot of them don't have much of a retirement plan, and they're looking for that. Other investors who want in on a deal. Once you have a good deal, if you talk to one person and they don't have the money to fund this deal, either send them out to find somebody else and say, look, you can have half this deal if you can find somebody else to put up the other half of the money, or ask them who they know that might have the money. Get a referral. It makes it an easier sell if you can call somebody up, and I call Gary up and say, Gary, George told me to call you. That's a lot easier to get in that door than it is to just cold call on somebody. So try to get a referral any chance you get. And we've already talked about your local investment club, and we've talked about number 4. A couple other thoughts here which are a little further out, and many of you won't want to go to this much effort, but it works pretty well. I've got one good friend, number 5 here about this newsletter, writes a newsletter 3 times a year. Not like I do, not every other month, and he doesn't sell it. He gives it away for free, and he gives it only to people he knows who are potential investors. So he comes up with a list. It might be 30 or 40 people. It's not a long list of people he's pretty sure that would invest with him if he come up with the right deal. And then he starts establishing credibility with these people. And how does he do that? He writes down his deals. He writes down his deals and he sends it to them. He doesn't solicit money directly. He's sending them letters with his deals. Now, over the internet, can you do this at pretty low cost? Yeah, you can email people letters, okay? So, there's ways to do this at very low cost, but you establish credibility, and I don't think it has to be a very long letter, but he says that he has an unlimited source of funds because of this little newsletter he sends out. Unlimited. Matter of fact, he can't even spend all the money. And, of course, this guy knows what he's doing. He's putting together good deals, but I will tell you, the deals I've been putting up on the board are far better than what he gives away. he'll buy something 10% below the market and raise the cash for it. Okay? So you don't have to give somebody, and the deals I've been putting on the board are really good deals. And you buy something, if you put $100,000 up and buy something $100,000 below the market, isn't that an extraordinary deal? That's a really good deal. If you put up $50,000 to buy something 10% below the market, that's not nearly as good, but those are the type of deals he structures, and because he brings in a chunk of cash when he buys those houses, he always has cash flow, doesn't he? He always has cash flow. So learn your business. You'll find that most people have never seen a deal as good as you have. You know, if you're really in this business and you make really good deals, you don't have to give much of that really good deal away. But think about sending out a very informal newsletter. Anybody ever get these letters from realtors? Anybody here alive? You get all sorts of stuff that you didn't solicit to, right? That you didn't ask for. They send you things. And why do they do that? They're trying to develop credibility and solicit your business. So you can do the same thing on a very low-key basis. Radio or TV shows, you know, some people actually start their own radio and TV shows. I don't suggest you do that. That'd be a lot of work. But you can, I guarantee you, if you just know a little bit about real estate, you can be the guest on somebody else's show. They don't screen very hard. I've been on those shows, okay? They're always looking for a guest to talk about real estate. And, you know, if you don't mind talking about real estate, it's not a bad thing to do in your town, to get on some talk show. Now, you're raising your profile. You may not want to be that famous, but you will get calls. You know, again, it establishes credibility, and you'll have access to people that maybe you wouldn't have access to without that. Call on ads in the paper run by other investors. Take them to lunch. You know, that's pretty easy to sell. Hey, you've got a house for rent. Can I buy you lunch? You probably get a lot of yeses. And so, you know, you get to know these people, and, you know, you might find that 4 out of 5 have no potential at all, but you might find one good one. How many investors are you looking for? You should be able to write down that number. You know, not how many am I looking for? How many are you looking for? Are you just looking for one investor? What would be the disadvantage of just having one? You could run out of money. But what if they didn't run out of money? What if they have unlimited money? What's still the disadvantage of having one? Yeah, you don't have much leverage there, do you? If you have two, and one guy won't fund it, then you can always go to the other guy. Or you can always tell your number one guy, if, you know, you don't, no pressure, because if you don't want it, Joe does want it. And that helps, having two guys. And of course, what else can happen to one guy? They die. People do die. And so if you have all your eggs in one basket, that's not a good idea, right? Get a couple baskets going. But write down how many you're looking for, so you have some theory, some feeling of how you want to promote this thing, so you know how many you're trying to recruit. Teach a class on real estate investing, and I already told you I did that once. In fact, I think that's such a good idea. If you'll turn the page, I've given you an outline for a 2-hour course, and you can make that 1 hour. You can make it all day if you want to stretch it a little bit. But I give you an outline right here in the book. If you want to teach a class, and I have a lot of students that teach classes either at junior college level, or they just invite people to come to their office. You know, they'll teach a free seminar, or they'll give a speech to a Rotary Club or somebody, and then they'll say, if anybody wants to have a whole half-day class, next Saturday I'm doing a half-day class in my office. Well, if you have the aptitude to do this, you don't have to be an expert to do this. You can just share some of your experiences. But again, you'll find if you get 5 or 6 people in a room, and Pete Fortunato started doing this when he was 20 years old, a good friend of mine. He would invite people, and here's a 20-year-old guy teaching a seminar to people probably 3 times his age on an average, and he's talking to them about what he was doing in real estate. And because he actually knew what he was doing, he found people who would invest with him. And Pete, like I, has only had 2 or 3 investors over his whole career of about 30 years, but they've been very loyal to him, and he's made them a lot of money. That's why they're loyal. So things like that do work, and all these things I'm telling you will work. And so if you're having trouble finding an investor, come back and study this list and say, what in here fits my personality? Because obviously not all of you are going to teach a seminar or even write a newsletter or be on a radio show, but you can all do some of these things, and they're all sources for you. Your list of potential investors on the next page, page 13. I won't take time in the class, but I think it's real important that before you go out and find that good deal, that you write down several people, and if you can write down 10, that's wonderful, but write down several people who you think are potential investors for a lot of reasons. And a lot of things we've covered here. They're on the same wavelength that you are. They already invest in real estate. They've got the right hair color. They drive the right kind of car. You know, something that makes sense to you, and start developing this list. And you won't be able to write them all down today, but if you start this list, tomorrow you'll think of somebody else, and then you'll run into somebody else and you can put it on this list. And at some point in time, you should be able to write down 10 people. And you shouldn't ever have to go through the whole list to find money. You know, and I say here at the bottom, if you're just starting, if you're just starting, you've never asked somebody to invest with you, who should you ask first? What does that say at the bottom? Your least likely prospect. And why is that? You get a little practice. That's right, you get a little practice. And if they say yes, you're really good. Maybe you're giving too much away. And that's not a bad thing to learn, is it? You know, if you're giving away too much, you need to learn that early on. And I've done that. How many people have done that, where you've invested with somebody and you gave away too much the first time? When you go back to these people and ask for more money, it's really hard to talk them into a better deal for you. You know, if you've paid somebody 12% interest, it's hard to talk them down to 10% interest. If you've given them too much of the deal away, it's hard to take some of that back. So there's a couple reasons that you should start with your least promising prospects to start with, because hopefully you don't hit a home run your first time out. Hopefully you have to practice a little bit, but you'll get better. You know, as you work your way up that list, you'll get better, and you'll be more confident, and you will have fielded many of the questions these people have, because many of them are going to have the same type of questions. Okay, so use that system, and then I think you'll have quite a bit of success. As I said, there's no shortage of money out there. No shortage of money. You probably are sitting next to it right now and don't know it. The next page, selecting the right property to invest in. I'll talk about some of the advantages of investing in a house as compared to some of the other things available to you. Now, I've owned apartment buildings, and I've owned commercial buildings, and I've owned land, I've owned a little bit of everything, and I've owned a lot of that stuff with partners. And I can tell you, most of it's not much fun. The house business has been very, very good to me, and I guess because I figured it out and I've specialized in it. And I think the key is specialization. No matter what you're going to do, get good at something. You know, don't do one apartment building, one commercial building, one house, one piece of land, and then start off on a mobile home park or something. Do one thing over and over again so you get really good at it. And if you get really good at it, you'll start making more and more money every time you buy something. And that's the key to this business. Some advantages if you happen to choose houses. And I will really recommend a house to you, especially for your investor deals, because of all these advantages they offer. Number one, liquidity. What does liquidity mean in the real estate business? Or any business? You can get your money back in a hurry, right? You can get your money back in a hurry. And think through that just for a second. Why can you get your money, and I mean all your money, why can you get it back out of a house faster than you can in an apartment building?
Larger market.
A larger market for buyers, and there's one other factor that's important here. Why don't you need as much down? Well, yeah, but there's one other thing, and you're on the right track.
Because you bought it
The
below market.
bank will loan more against a house than anything else, won't they? What kind of loan can you get against your apartment building if you go down to the bank? Maybe 70%. But if I go down and borrow, and if I sell my house to an apartment building investor, and they have 10% down, and the bank will give them 70, that means there's 20% they still owe me, isn't there? I didn't get it all. If I sell my house, who am I going to sell my house to? A user. Always. Never sell to another investor. The user can go down to the bank, and how big a loan can they get? They can get it all. They can get an FHA loan or a VA loan or 95% conventional loan. They can cash me out. I can get all my money back. So this is a unique thing. You can't do that in a land business. If I sell my land, I hardly ever get cash. I always finance land when I sell it. I sell apartment buildings. I end up financing them. I've done that. Same thing with duplexes and commercial buildings. I rarely get all cash because people buying those things who are they? Who buys land in apartment buildings and duplexes? Investors, right? And first of all, they don't want to give me their cash. They're going to hold on to that cash. And if they go down to the bank and borrow money, typically the bank's only going to loan them a very small percentage. 60 or 70 or 80% would be very high on most of these deals, which leaves a gap. So the houses I can cash out of 100 cents on the dollar because of the system, because they make great collateral. And that's what number 2 says. They are easy to borrow against. So even you can borrow against them. And if you don't want to go to the bank and borrow money, you might go to another investor and borrow money to buy somebody out. But they're good collateral, so you can get your money back out. It's a lot easier to establish value. Somebody was talking to me at the break about it was hard to figure out what things are worth. It's easier to figure out what a house is worth in a normal neighborhood than it is anything else. Now, I say a normal neighborhood. Stay away from neighborhoods where they're all unique houses. You know, probably not the neighborhood you live in. If they're all designed by an architect, this is the wrong neighborhood to be buying in. You want houses that all look alike. You know, you go down the street and there's 15 houses and there's 4 different floor plans. So after you've seen about 4 of them, you can figure out what the 5th one's going to look like. Those houses are easy to value because they're all about the same size, They're all about the same, maybe all built by the same builder. And so neighborhoods like that in your town. Specialize in those neighborhoods, especially when you first start, so you know values. Once you get good at this, then you can venture into the higher price, more unique properties, but you're taking chances when you go there, because it's really hard to establish value as you get more expensive. If I take you out to a $500,000 neighborhood, will all those houses look the same? Will they all be worth $500,000? No. I mean, you might have a $500,000 house next door to a $350,000 house, so you can't go 500, 500, 500. But if you go in that neighborhood, if you drop down, whether they're 13 and 14 and 1,500 square foot houses that are all built by one builder, those houses will be very consistent in value. Now, some of them may be beat up and they may take some work, but as far as square footage and location and design and everything else, they're going to be consistent. It's hard to make a mistake in those neighborhoods. Easy to rent. You should know what something's going to rent for before you buy it. And that's getting back to the basics. But because you know it's going to be easy to rent, you know the cash flow is going to be dependable. And that's very important to you. If you bought a motel or an apartment building, the cash flow may not be dependable at all. It may be half empty. This motel, I guarantee, is losing money right now. It doesn't have any cash flow at all if you look at the number of cars in the parking lot. So you have to be very careful about different kinds of properties. Real estate is not a simple business. Some people get into it because it looks simple. There are a lot of moving parts in the real estate business. Less volatile in price. I've already showed you my chart where the houses don't go up and down as much. They're kind of steady. Easier to find a good deal. I have never been stumped. And we teach a 3-day class, and I'll teach it here in January. But in that 3-day class, we go out in the class and look for deals. And we always find deals. Sometimes you find 5 or 6 deals. It depends on the market. And sometimes you only find one. But I have never been stumped. When somebody says find a house in a day, I've always been able to find a good deal in one day. That's because I know what I'm doing. But I know where to look. I look in neighborhoods where I know value, so I don't have to do a lot of research. Then I look for some simple signs. Tell me some signs that tell you it's a good deal if I'm looking in the house business. How do I spot a house? Run-down houses, long grass, empty. Thank you. If I find those 3 things, isn't that enough? I'm going to stop looking. I've got a winner right now. We have won the lottery. Now we just have to figure out who owns this house and why is it sitting empty. Houses shouldn't ever sit empty. There's no logic behind letting a house sit empty. You should either rent it or sell it. So you find an empty house, somebody needs to do some business with you. It's just that simple. And it doesn't take me long to find an empty house. Easy to predict cash flow. Cash flow is steadier. You can do a 5-year projection in a house business and be a lot closer to if you do a 5-year projection in any other kind of business, because you can plug in a little bit below market rent and assume that you'll stay full. And that's a pretty good assumption. And easy to manage. You can manage a lot of houses all by yourself. You don't need a big staff to manage a half a dozen or a dozen houses. If you go out and buy a big apartment building, you're immediately going to be hiring folks to help you because a lot of things will be broken and you can't do it all yourself. So especially if you buy the right kind of houses. If you buy real low-end houses, there's a lot, you're collecting rent by the week, and I know some of you do that. There's more cash flow in that, but it also takes more of your time. If you have more expensive houses, you'll have a lot fewer tenants to tie up that same $1 million, so you'll have to work a little less to collect the rent. Of course, you'll have less rent collected, too. I mean, it all fits together, doesn't it?